Good afternoon. I'm Meteorologist Bailey Braun, and looking ahead for this work week, we actually have quite a few changes ahead. That includes southeast with some storms on the way, as well as some dry conditions moving into the interior. So we'll just jump right into it, and I will tell you what you can expect looking ahead this work week. So as we look ahead, we're going to see some unsettled weather moving in for South Central. That includes some morning snow moving in across the Glen Highway, which I'll talk about in just a second. Those dry conditions into the interior and the slope for some more sunnier skies and some colder temperatures as well as a series of storms moving ahead for southeast. So that's kind of our biggest headline that we'll be focusing on. So just looking at our satellite and radar from this afternoon, there's this low pressure system sitting off in the Bering Sea. This has been bringing in a little bit of snow into western Alaska, especially for areas near Bethel and the YK Delta, as well as some rain mixtures moving in for the Aleutians. Now, we also have a special weather statement for South Central, more specifically for the Glen Highway. And this is going to include some snow building up into tomorrow morning. This is only going to be between a trace to 2 inches of snow. So anywhere between 1 to 2 inches, or even just a trace moving along the Glen Highway that might impede some commuting. If you're commuting into South Central, moving in through Wasilla, that's going to impede your commute. So expect some more of those snowier conditions moving in for the morning. But other than that, we're expecting some flurries in Anchorage and in South Central in general, but other than that, no real concerns. Now, there's also a special weather statement for southeast. This includes a series of storms that we're going to be looking at, which are going to bring some heavy rainfall this week, as well as some gusting winds. So it's going to be a pretty impactful week for southeast, but first I want to focus over in western Alaska and the southwestern portion specifically. So we have this low pressure system that's bringing in some scattered showers. You can already see all those random little dots of purple for snow, as well as some of those green dots as well. So very scattered snow, very scattered rain as well. That's going to start to move in Monday morning, and that's going to bring in lots of rain for the Aleutians. You're going to see between 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch just by Monday, and then even more expected by Tuesday. So we're also going to have some gusting winds moving in, but you can see statewide, even just looking at western Alaska into the interior and up into the North Slope, very quiet conditions. Not a whole lot happening over there, but we are noticing a few more scattered showers moving into South Central tomorrow morning. That's where we're really starting to see some of those more snowy mixtures moving in, like I had mentioned with that special weather statement along the Glen Highway, but then we're going to see a little bit more snow into higher elevation regions. And then you're going to also notice that moving into Monday, not a whole lot happening for southeast, some scattered showers moving on through, some mostly dry conditions though. But then by Tuesday, you're going to see this big low pressure system. That's one of the first systems that we're looking at for this week. This is going to bring snowy mixtures, rain as well, and then those strong winds. But then we have another system that's going to move in by Wednesday. You can already see that moving in. So if you live in southeast Alaska, it's going to be a very busy week in terms of weather. So expect heavy rainfall this week, as well as some strong wind gusts, and then some of those snow accumulations might even roll through as well. And that's especially true for those higher elevation regions. So wind gusts within the next 3 days or so. We're looking ahead to very dry, very calm winds moving through for Monday, but then Tuesday, that's when that low pressure system moves through into Ketchikan and the southern portion of the Panhandle. Even some of that moving across the Aleutians with that low pressure system, which is we already know that's one of the big impacts with that first low pressure system moving through the Bering Sea. And then there's another low pressure system following suit from that first system hitting southeast. So that's going to move in by Wednesday. So you're going to have one round by Tuesday, another round by Wednesday, and then we're expecting a third one to move in by Thursday, moving through on Friday. Looking at our snow totals, you can see western into the interior, very dry conditions, and then even looking at the interior, significantly drier than what we saw this weekend. Not a whole lot happening, just traces of snow moving on through, but then into South Central, you can see some of those traces in very, very light blue moving on through, but then heavier snow portions expected for Whittier and for Seward as well. So they're catching some of those outer bands from that low pressure system moving through the Gulf of Alaska, but then Tuesday, following that low pressure system, we're going to see some more moderate totals for snowfall. That's mostly for those higher elevation regions, 2 to 4 inches expected, but not really a whole lot. Otherwise, the big thing to know for southeast are those heavy rainfall totals, as well as those really strong winds. So with our snow chances moving in through Monday morning for the Glen Highway, as I had mentioned, you're going to see those chances in the morning for Monday, tapering off quite a bit by the afternoon, but that special weather statement is still ongoing with that wintry mix moving on through. So really it's just about those of you who are commuting, and just to be aware, it's an abrupt change in what we've been seeing. So that's why it's so significant to know, even though it's not really a whole lot of snow. I know Alaskans know how to handle the winters, so I'm not even going to go there, but looking at our expected rainfall totals, you can see that very dry conditions, even then, in western Alaska. Hardly any rainfall totals accumulating other than Seward, and then off into southeast and the Aleutians. So the southern portion of Alaska, that's where we're really seeing those rain totals accumulate, but elsewhere hardly any rain whatsoever. So just looking statewide, you can just get a better look at what we're really expecting to see with those more dry conditions for the interior up into the North Slope as well. Western Alaska, you will see some dry conditions into Monday, but some of the more southern portions in southwest, the YK Delta, that's where we're going to see some chances of snow moving in for the morning, otherwise drying out quite a bit. So Aleutians expect to get some rainfall tomorrow, as well as those gusting winds, and southeast, very calm conditions tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be your break before we get some more active weather moving through with those rounds of rainfall moving in. So this is where we're really seeing those mostly cloudy skies. If you get any rain, it's going to be very light rain, just a couple hundredths of an inch. It's not a lot of rain whatsoever, just a little sprinkle. Those temperatures aren't really hitting the freezing mark except for up in Yakutat, but other than that, they're still sitting just a little bit too warm for that, especially with those highs in the 40s. So into the interior, seeing those dry skies, that partly sunny sky cover moving through, but with that those dry conditions moving through, that's where you're seeing those temperatures in the 20s, and then even those lows dipping down at near 15 degrees. So it's really getting chilly over there, but even chillier up in the North Slope. You're seeing that low in Anaktuvuk Pass at -3. So the first negative temperature of the season, we're already seeing that moving in for Monday, and then in the single digits for Dead Horse for those lows, but then those lows sitting up near 20 degrees in Wainwright and Utqiagvik. So that's what you can expect, potentially some flurries moving through Wainwright, but in western Alaska we're seeing those temperatures sitting in the 20s. Gamble's still staying a little bit warmer, but that's where we're expecting some snowfall in those areas across the Bering Sea, so that includes St. Paul as well as Gamble, and then some of those snowy mixtures moving through in the morning for western Alaska. But those temperatures are really just dropping. That's the biggest thing to know for that region. Now for the Aleutians, we're seeing more of those gusting winds moving through between 40 and 50 miles per hour from Adak up into Unalaska, and then more rainy conditions moving on through all the way from those western to eastern islands. That's just rain moving on through following that chain, and then it's going to move up the Alaska Peninsula going into Tuesday and Wednesday. So south central, expect those mostly dry conditions throughout the Kenai Peninsula, but then Seward is where we're really seeing a lot more of that moisture moving through. That includes both rain and snow. You're noticing those temperatures are still above freezing, so with that, you're not really expecting to see a whole lot of snow since it's above the freezing point, but do expect quite a bit of rain to move on through for tomorrow morning. Very similar conditions moving through the Copper River Basin. Expect some rainy skies tomorrow, but those temperatures still not quite at the freezing point to accumulate much snow. We'll see some changes ahead later on this week, but into the valley, that's where we are seeing those temperatures sub-freezing for those lows in Wasilla and Palmer. That's really where we're seeing that special weather statement being issued from, but then mostly cloudy skies as you get a little bit more up the valley, but those highs sitting in the mid-30s. And even in Anchorage, that's when we're seeing that snowy mixture possibility for tomorrow morning, with those lows sitting in the 30s and then the highs sitting in the mid-30s. So we're not really seeing too much of a difference with our low temperature and our high temperature, still sitting sub-freezing for those lows, but those highs are getting much cooler, and you can even see that in our 7-day with those highs really sitting in the mid-30s pretty much across the board all week long. That's what you can expect, but all of those lows sitting at or below freezing. So those lows are getting pretty cold, and you can already feel it. I felt it this morning heading outside, but in Fairbanks, not quite comparable, still much chillier over there with those low temperatures near 15 degrees and those highs sitting in the 20s. So It's getting chilly. We already know that the winter season is starting to come up upon us. And then we also have our daylight savings time moving in for November 2nd. So that's next Sunday. Don't forget to rewind your clocks by then. But other than that, just expect some rainier conditions moving in for the Aleutian Islands and for Southeast, but much drier conditions moving in for most of the western portion of Alaska, as well as into the interior and the slope. And then if you are commuting tomorrow from Wasilla to Anchorage, let us know how that commute is going, because the National Weather Service is expecting 1 to 2 inches of snow. So hopefully it's not too bad. Don't be late for work or anything like that. But I hope everybody has a great rest of your night, rest of your weekend, and we will see you back later on this week. So have a great night.